Now, an important part of any sales presentation is a true needs-based analysis. So for some of you who do not have internet access while you're in the home making the sales presentation, and you cannot use our final expense estimator that is found at www.finalexpenseestimator.com, we have created a complete funeral expense worksheet to really help you estimate the final expenses for your clients. Now, this is a proven system to really help you estimate the actual cost for your client for their actual funeral expenses. Now, you pull out this worksheet, and as you're going through it, you simply say, now, Mr. and Ms. Smith, I find that many people don't know how much actual funerals cost these days. So I want to help you estimate what your funeral expenses might be to better give you an idea of what your final expenses might cost. Now we just want to walk through the funeral expense worksheet and simply start by saying, now, Mr. and Ms. Smith, are you interested in a traditional funeral and burial or a cremation service? Whichever one they say, just go to that section. So let's say that they say, I'm interested in a traditional burial. On these boxes on the left-hand side, you want to check that box and then write in whatever number it is. So for a traditional funeral, we have put together an average throughout the country of what these numbers might cost. They may vary a little bit by your area, but these are national averages. So you would just check traditional funeral and then write in $2,500 on the right-hand side. Now, we have two different blanks on this section here for you. One is for a husband and one's for a wife. We didn't want to list that on the top there because you may be dealing with a widow or a widower, and we didn't want to make this uncomfortable for you or the client. So we left that blank, but for the two spaces, you would help estimate for both of your clients there. So now you've got the funeral home services section done. Now you would skip cremation because they said they wanted a traditional burial, and you go straight to casket. And you say, Mr. and Ms. Smith, caskets can range from $995 to as much as you want to spend, essentially. Now, just for estimating purposes, which would you be interested in? A basic casket for $995, standard casket for $24.95, or premium casket for $5,900, or is there some other amount you want to select? Typically, people select the amount that's in the middle, so they might say, well, I just want the standard. That sounds good for me. You just check off standard and write in $24.95. Now you go to the vault. Most cemeteries now require that there is an outer burial container or a vault for the cemetery. Which vault would you like to select here? We have a basic concrete vault for $995 or standard steel for $14.95. Which one sounds better for you? Let's say that they select basic. So you just check basic at $995 and write that in on the right-hand side. And then the cemetery property. Mr. and Ms. Smith, do you already have cemetery property? If they say yes, skip that part. If they say no, then select burial plot for $1,500. Put that in over there. And then there's also always cemetery charges that includes opening and closing of the grave, which is also usually about $1,500 on average. So you would check that and put that over on that side. Now, if they say that they already have cemetery property, they probably still need the opening and closing of the grave. So you would still probably want to estimate that $1,500 for the cemetery charges in on that section. Now you go to the monument section. There's two major styles of monument: a basic flush monument that can be mowed over, and then the standard upright monument, which is the one that's more traditional. Now, the basic flush monument is about $500 on average, and the standard is around starting at about $1,200. Which are you interested in? Let's say that they selected the basic flush. So that would be, you would check basic and write in $500 on the right. Now, Mr. and Ms. Smith, I always recommend people at least budget some for flowers. Now, you're going to get a lot of flowers from your friends and family, I'm sure, but it's always nice to go ahead and budget in something to help your family out with this cost. Now, for a casket spray, it's typically going to be about $350. And then for a floral stand or something else from your family, you should look at around $300 on that. Would you like to include both of those? And let's say that they said yes here. So you would check both and write $350 for the casket spray and $300 for the floral stand. And now, finally, you want to just say, Mr. and Miss Smith, there's always miscellaneous costs. There's always stuff that comes up that we just don't think about. That it can include sales tax, music, clergy, extra cars, police escort, catering, clothing, death certificates, and any other extra expenses that come up. Now, I always recommend people budget for at least $500 of miscellaneous cost. Is that enough, or do you want to budget for more? Let's say that sounds like a good plan for them, so they check off 500 and write in 500 over there. So now what we do is we total up, and pull out your calculator, and add together what all of these numbers would be for their personal funeral expense worksheet. So now that you pulled out your calculator and you added all those numbers up, what they selected in this example would be $10,640, which is really an average funeral in most areas. So now you've walked through and really helped them estimate what their funeral expenses might be. Now, if they said, oh my gosh, $10,000, I had no idea it was that much. Well, Mr. and Miss Smith, this is what you selected. Is there something you want to add to or remove from this list? Most of the time they'll say, no, if that's what it costs, that's what it costs. So now what we do is go to our personalized plan for your final expense worksheet. Now this really breaks down your funeral expenses, your family expenses, and your total final expenses. So after you've completed their funeral expenses, write in $10,640. There are two parts of estimating final expenses. You have your funeral expenses, but you also have your family expenses. And then whenever we add these together, this is what gives you your total final expenses. Now, all too often, people forget to estimate their family expenses, and this can leave a tremendous burden on their family, and I want to make sure that this doesn't happen to you. Now, just because someone passes away, it doesn't mean that the electric bill is not going to come next month, the mortgage or rent payment is not going to keep coming, or all of the other household expenses are going to end right away. There are a lot of unforeseen expenses that come up, like medical bills, attorney's fees, and even taxes. Therefore, we like to help you estimate what your family expenses are so that you can provide at least 90 days worth of these funds to cover these expenses to help your family get back on the ground. A simple way to estimate your family expenses is to take your monthly expenses and then multiply them by 3 to give your family 3 months of money to cover these expenses. Now, Mr. and Miss Smith, what is roughly your monthly expense budget? Now, ladies and gentlemen, you have to wait and let them answer this. Seniors typically are on a fixed budget, and so most seniors know exactly what their monthly expenses are. And they'll tell you, well, it's $2,000. That's what I spend on per month.